clear up some stuff. First things first, after conversations I've had with a lot of my trans friends, TS Doc Batty, Kay Poyer, Zaya, Selena, I'll tag all of them below. What they've shared with me is that the biggest issue and critique they have with all of this is, first of all, that trans women are taking the absolute brunt of all of this. At the end of this entire discourse, trans women are being harmed and targeted, and I'm the metaphorical gun pointing at them. And the main critique that they have shared with me is that there should have been a trans woman in the room if you're going to talk about trans women's experiences, which is extremely fair to say. Obviously, in the context of the situation, ER was trying to talk about how TERF rhetoric is specifically targeting trans women, obviously, and weaponizing a very...
I'm sorry, Drew, is there somebody sleeping behind you? Am I confused? Is there a dog in the background? Do you guys hear snoring? Am I confused? Am my earphones weird?
Real fear that cis women also deal with. And the entire intention behind the conversation was obviously to have an open discussion about trans rights, which...
Is there a sleeping man? Is there a dog? What is happening? Why do creatives do this? Why is everyone so bad at sound? Why? I can't think. I can't focus.
Even ER has said themselves they probably could have worded better. I think if you watch the full episode, you can understand it a little bit better, at least what they were trying to say. But all that being said, I have expressed to...
I'm sorry, this is such a serious topic and I can't stop laughing. Snoring is so funny. The snoring is so funny. You can't put a snoring dog behind you when you're talking about something serious. Now I'm gonna look like an asshole. Like, why is Brittany laughing? This isn't funny. There's a snoring dog in the back. That's hilarious.
All of the women that I already mentioned, publicly and privately, that I am so incredibly sorry to the trans women who are now being targeted because of this entire discourse. That is not something that should have ever happened, especially when they were not involved. As far as speaking to the perspective of womanhood, I'm just gonna tell y'all what I think. I feel like, personally, trans women have a much more beautiful outlook on womanhood than myself. The key word being than myself. You don't have to agree with that. The reason why I feel that way, though, is because for me, a lot of my womanhood has been rooted.
That's not true for me. I don't think trans women have a more beautiful understanding of, but I think queer people who've deconstructed gender have some of the most profound relationships with gender. I think that's why I am a queer, philosophically queer. That's why I engage in gender deconstruction. And that's why I'm a gender deconstructionist, because I think queer people have some of the most profound, but no offense to trans women, they're not always queer. Trans women are not a monolithic experience. So unless they're queer, I don't really care what they have to say. Like, sometimes I do, but like, they're no different to me than like any other woman in the world, because they're just a woman. And that just is going to be offensive, but think about it. You're just a woman, right? Okay, so you have an experience. It's a valid experience. It's profound in a different way. Trans women have so much to offer the world, but trans women who are queer, now that's interesting. Trans women that hold an understanding of the binary as it is and as restrictive as it is, now that's interesting. Now, okay, but that's just me, okay, right?
In my fear and anger towards the systemic oppression that we face, towards the violence that we suffer at the hands of men. So my perception of my womanhood has been rooted in suffering a lot and finding community with trans people, and more specifically...
And not just trans women, trans people, right? Like trans people. Like Judith Butler is not a trans woman. Judith Butler is a trans person. They're a queer person, and they are the person who's known for gender deconstruction. And so like, I love Judith Butler. I love their brain. I love their writing. I love just like the concept around gender being a performance. And so again, it's queer. And even like when we talk about those trans women that are our icons in our community, a lot of them were like very queer. A lot of them were very queer trans women. So again, they were living very aggressively in their self. Like they were so aggressively them. And that is such a profound experience, to be so unapologetically yourself.
Trans women has completely shifted how I see womanhood. It has added color and life to what I perceive to be endurance, if that makes sense. What women have to endure, both cis and trans, is a lot. And it is heavy and it is hard, but it is also so beautiful. I know that love is real because I've been loved by women, both cis and trans. And that is how I feel about the perception of my womanhood personally. Again, you don't have to feel that way. But all of that being said, I appreciate my trans friends coming coming to me and talking to me about this and having this discussion with me. As someone who is a staunch and steadfast ally, obviously y'all know that, I know that I will continue to grow and evolve in my advocacy and the way I can show up for trans people and trans women specifically.
Why are cis women considered allies to trans women if we're all just women, right? Maybe we should stop calling ourselves allies, because that doesn't make any sense. Like, you can be an ally to the gay community if you're not gay, but why are you an ally to trans women if trans women are women, right? Like, this is what Kat Black was trying to say about, I think, her being labeled as queer, which I still disagree with philosophically, but I understand, is like, if Kat's a woman, then why are you saying you're an ally? Right? But maybe it's like white women and black women will say we're an ally to black women because we're not black women, but also what's the difference? So maybe that's the dilemma with it being a trans woman, white woman, disabled woman. Like, this is why I think Paris, the 20-something lesbian on TikTok, is basically saying, like, I support women, period. Because, and this is why she said, I would choose women over men any day, even men of color, because I think there's something to be said about making sure that we're just like pro-women, period. But because we live in a patriarchy, like, the fact that we have to be pro-women is because of patriarchy. Otherwise, if we didn't live under patriarchy, why would we need women's movements? Women's movements birthed out of patriarchy. So you're like putting us in a weird position where, of course, we have to be for all women. And we are, because we're being threatened by this administration, we're being threatened by the world. And this goes into everything else, right? So there's something here that might be too nuanced for the world to handle, but I think our community, I say community because we're on YouTube and anyone could be here, but you know, the people who are seriously interested in deconstructing and doing the work, I think there's something here we could talk about maybe, but I don't know what it is yet.
To everyone that is being a TERF, you are not welcome on my page. My feminism includes trans women. I do not weigh one over the other. I weigh cis and trans women the same. And I will continue to fight for both cis and trans women. If your feminism is not intersectional, it does not help all women. And just to reiterate, I'm so sorry again to all the trans women that are being affected by this. That is not something I ever wanted to happen. And I'm sorry that it did. Anyways, that's it. Make sure y'all follow all of the people I tag. Thanks, y'all.
Okay, interesting. So Drew basically made the decision. She must have really sat on this, I think, even though it happened quick. She made the decision to signal very hard at the TERFs and the transphobes. She didn't even for a second coddle cis women. Very interesting. TERFy cis women. Very interesting. Like, she really sat there and said, I'm not even going to give you an inch. Okay, queen. Okay, queen. That must have been hard. I think we underestimate how hard it must have been for Drew to make this decision in many ways. But nowhere in that video, and maybe I'm wrong, did I hear her even attempt to coddle the feelings of those women, even though I think there's a place for it. So Kat Black did that. I did that in my work. But Drew decided not to do it in hers. And I think probably because, and I hate to say this to Kat and I, not that we're not independent and successful, but Drew has a bigger following. And Drew's following is different because she's reaching a lot of, forgive me, normies. Kat and I do not reach normies in that capacity, not with the work we do now. But I think Kat and I were deeply empathetic to a lot of these women because we knew that they, I think, were authentically coming from a truly hurt place. And again, that hurt place doesn't, I think, change how you've impacted marginalized people or punching down on each other, right? I don't think that changes that. But I get it. Like, I don't think a lot of these women I've watched, a lot of the TERFs I've watched, I don't think they're just hateful and bigoted. I think they're bigoted because they're afraid. And that's why I think most bigotry is it comes from a place of fear. You know, what's going to happen to my family though? What's accountability even look like? Like, you know, what if I am bigoted? So then they double down. They go, well, maybe I am a TERF. I guess I am bigoted. Instead of saying, like, you're not going to be thrown in bigotry jail because you're a bigot. But you will alienate the people in your life that you say you love for not taking accountability. You know, and I see this in my own family and friends. Like, when I try to hold my friends or my family accountable, my conservative family, they're so scared about the consequence of what accountability looks like. So they're just like, yeah, but what do you want to happen? I was like, well, an apology would be a good start. They're like, okay, but what then? And I was like, well, why don't we start with an apology? Okay, but what after the apology? They're afraid to even apologize because, and to be fair to them, it's because it gets weaponized. Not by the left, but by the right. I saw this in the debate bro bubbles. If I ever admitted any accountability or fault, it was weaponized against me video after video by liberals. This is why I say leftist spaces, queer spaces have got to be different than liberal Republican spaces, liberal Democrat, liberal or Republican conservative spaces, because they do hold it against you. Politics is about winning. It's about getting any dirt on your opponent you can. And I'm saying this is why we don't do politics on this channel. We talk about politics, but I am not political. I vote, but I'm not making political content because I'm not trying to win. I'm trying to give people problems. Like I'm trying to solve people's problems with them. I'm trying to work as a collective. Okay. So when we have these conversations about gender, I think this is a good place to start, but I also think it's important for us to recognize that if it starts looking and smelling like MAGA, it might just be, but even on accident. So a lot of these liberal women that were like, MAGA kind of has a point. This was your time to meditate. If at any point in your brain you go, maybe conservatives have a point, pause, right? I get it. It's a human thing. Your brain does it, but that should be the red flag. Okay, check out this TikTok I really liked.
Is not traditional. Transphobia is not traditional. Homophobia is not traditional. Watching so many BIPOC women flip so easily, like on an indigenous woman, over some turf bullshit is actually crazy. And everybody's like, oh my God, she called us a turf, like whatever that means. You're literally repeating turf talking points. Making room for trans women doesn't displace you. It doesn't put you in danger. In fact, we're safer when we stick together. To watch indigenous women support turf nonsense against another indigenous woman is so disheartening. And I see you guys asking a lot. So trans exclusionary radical feminism, that's what being a turf is. And it's not a good thing, sis. You guys are like, well then I guess I'm a turf. Don't be one. That's not traditional. You're on the pipeline to MAGA. Cut it out. Also to see you guys on here being like Drew Afualo, I'm sorry, I don't know how to say her name, but it's being like Drew's fighting for her life in her comments. No, she's actually fighting for your lives. We're trying to save our own communities from being transphobic and gross and disgusting. Transphobia is not traditional. Transphobia is not traditional. Homophobia is not traditional.
This is what I'm saying. The irony of the situation, I just love the way that this is phrased, but just the irony of everything that's happening of just, and I think they use they, them pronouns. Their name is neurodivergent Regina George, which is, neurodivergent. Maybe they use she, her actually. No, maybe they are she, her. Neurodivergent Regina George is the most hilarious username. She's so funny. I think it is she, her. I don't see any pronouns, so I'm going to assume she, her. That's so funny. Neurodivergent Regina George. Hilarious. I think this is so true that the indigenous part is important, the people of color part, the BIPOC part, but like even more so, just like you are going down a MAGA pipeline. That's what is so fascinating. And I get it because I think, we've been there in our lives because I was raised conservative. I had to come out of conservatism. And even though I came out old by some people's standards, young by other people's standards, and again, coming out of conservatism, guys, I'm unlearning every day. Your background, you have to unlearn every day. So that's why I say the difference is you have to pause and think, okay, what do I believe? Before I get swept up in this TikTok stuff, hold on. What are my values before I jump on stream today? That's what I've been meditating on. Okay, what are my values before I start talking about this topic? Before chat gets in my ear, before I get wrapped up in the debate bro like logic, what are my values? Now it's interesting because I saw rhetoric that was like, oh, even men are starting to agree with Drew, which is a point that Drew is wrong. Here's the thing that happened. So liberal men are vocally often very pro-LGBT, while also being not as woke as they claim to be in the literal sense. Okay, not as deconstructed from misogyny as they want to be, right? Look at Hassan Piker, Kyle Klinsky, all these men who are the largest microphones in our communities suffer from misogyny. They are just rampantly patriarchal, okay? But they would probably look at these liberal women on TikTok and be like, these dumb B words, because they love to call women B words. These dumb B words, they're so stupid, they're so transphobic. Yeah, we don't like them. These men cannot talk about these women this way, okay? These men are in positions of power in which they will often use that position of power under patriarchy and in terms of their wealth to punch down on women. And Hassan said that in an interview recently. He said, yeah, sometimes I tell women who are conservative or bigoted, misogynistic things, right? And people say that's bad, but they're kind of like bad women. Okay, no. Because again, when we're talking about vulnerable communities, women are the one who are being deliberately targeted by this administration. Women are literally being targeted, okay? So I need to make it clear to you, I'm going to show you 2 TikToks, that I don't know anything about these men. And even though the TikTok is good in spirit, it does not tell me enough about these men. To watch one TikTok and assume, oh my God, these men are deconstructed, these men are great. I don't know that. I appreciate that they're coming out in defense of trans people, but I don't know anything else about them. And this is why I say, I don't know enough about you if you're anti-trans or if you're pro-trans. That doesn't tell me enough about you yet. This is kind of like when you first leave conservatism or you start joining leftist circles or liberal circles, and you assume that people are like the same kind of liberal or leftist as you just because we're all pro-LGBT. And then all of a sudden they won't call you they, them because they're like, that doesn't count. You know what I mean? Okay, watch this TikTok. This is about the NBA players, okay?
2 former NBA players, and when I say former NBA, I'm being generous, have declared themselves for the WNBA draft. Quick question. When is the WNBA draft? I'm talking to you. When is the WNBA draft? Right. April 2027, 8 months away, 34 weeks, 200 plus days away. So why are we talking about this right now? Why all of a sudden are we so focused on this right now? The WNBA has been around for 30 years. Trans people, way longer than that. So why are we so laser focused on this right now? You think it's random? This specific time, this specific administration, these specific individuals. It just happened. They told you this is because the WNBA doesn't have a specific criteria of what a woman is. Does the NBA have a criteria for what a male is? No. How about the MLB? No. How about the NFL? No. Can you imagine Ray Lewis meeting your sister in the A-gap? I'm asking you why we're so focused on this right now, and you think it's random. They told you it's because we want to make sure they have a specific criteria for what a woman is. But if they cared so much, why would they stop there? Now let's just say for some reason the WNBA puts out a statement today that says you have to be assigned female at birth to join the WNBA. Would that solve everything? Would that make this all go away? Would y'all just shut up and stop talking about it? Finally? Probably not. You can bring up intersex, you can say preemie. That's a small percentage of people. I don't know why we even focus on that. And I'm saying, I don't even know why y'all focusing on trans people. They're a smaller population of that. And you're going to say, well, they got to bring in that birth certificate. That'll show what they're assigned. And I'm going to say, I'm going to have a home birth here with my wife, nobody else. And I got 5 days here in Florida to bring that information to the government. And I can lie. I could be in here building something up. Ask China about Yao Ming. And then they're going to ask for extensive proof. We need proof that that's a boy or a girl. But they don't have a criteria here of what the extensive proof is. What do you want to pick? No, they'll probably do gene testing. Then we can get into the conversation of Caster Semenya or Maria Patino or Iman Khalif. Do you see where I'm going with this? It can just keep going on and on and on. There is no foolproof, perfect way to determine what somebody is or how you want them to be presented. There's always going to be a but. Now, there's a very serious conversation that can be had about sports and gender and everything surrounding that, but let's not act like these people care. Because they don't. They tell you that they're here to protect women while using women as a prop to attack a marginalized community. We could have had a serious conversation about requirements, about intersex people, about privacy, about policy, about biology not fitting the box for every specific human that's ever lived, but instead you opted to put on a wig and to put on a WNBA hoodie and make a mockery of women everywhere because you never had the brains to come up with the rules and regulations that would govern the bodies of millions of human beings.
Billions.
So instead you do this. In the meantime, I hope you have a wonderful day. You know I love you and I'll see you tomorrow.
Like, yeah, like generally I agree with this. I don't know anything about this person, but yeah, like billions of people will be impacted. Okay, here's another example.
Man.
It says the dumbest person you know reacting to Ennis Cantor declaring for the WNBA draft.
Man, I can't wait for Ennis Cantor to join the WNBA and show the world why women's sports is a joke.
I thought your biggest fear was men going into women's sports. Isn't that the biggest thing you guys are afraid of? But now you want him to go and dominate women?
What?
Don't say what. You know what I'm talking about. You guys have had this fake hysteria about men joining women's sports. Do you hate women more or trans people?
Can't I just fucking hate both? Also, you're misgendering Ennis. He doesn't identify as a man anymore. He identifies as a woman, libtard.
Okay, so now you believe in pronouns when it suits your narrative? You believe in gender pronouns?
Ow.
What? What's wrong?
You're making me critically think, and now the neurons in my brain are vomiting.
Okay, so obviously I don't know anything about these people, but sometimes the conversations can feel that reductive. Sometimes the conversations can feel like that, where it's like, what are you talking about? What are we even talking about? You know? Okay, Ready for this? Now let's start talking about like what is a woman, okay? Watch out, Mount Walsh might pop up behind me. Let's start talking about like what is gender, and then we're gonna swing it into this idea of like, can men have PCOS, PMOS? Okay, can men XYZ, right?
Video asking why. I made a video asking why women get offended when we call them cis women, even though you are a cis woman, because cis woman means woman. And somebody commented, we don't need the identifier. No need for it. I was like, don't you use labels every day? Like, isn't it contradicting to be like, we don't need the identifier? But identifiers are labels. Like, you use labels every day. Like, you're a woman. I'm a black woman. I'm mixed, unfortunately. I'm half white. But, like, I'm short. Like, all labels. All labels, babe.
Now, a label is a very interesting thing because it's a communication tool. So everything we're using to communicate is meant to bring a clarification. The problem is that if people don't understand the words, there is no clarification. And I know this because I discuss this with people on a daily basis, but also in my own personal life, where when I'm trying to explain a concept to them, like what's the difference between a drag queen and a trans person, there are so many things they need to know to even have that conversation. But usually what they do is they jump to the end of the conversation. And when you're having a debate or discussion with anybody, when you're even just trying to educate people, when you're a teacher even, okay, there has to be some understanding, okay, that you have to build on understanding. So this is what's hard. So, okay, hold on. Okay. So let's say this is where the question is. Oops, that looks like a 2. Okay, this is where the question is. Okay, so this person asks you the question. Okay, and you see this question, you're like, damn, I really want to answer this question. But hey, before I answer this question, we kind of have to go all the way down here, okay, to answer this question. But the thing is, this person doesn't know there's a down here. They can't even see it. It looks like nothing. They're like, what are you fucking pointing at? But in your vision, you can literally see, right? So the other way let me do it like this. So you can see that there's a box because you have this ability. So you can see this and this. They can only see what's in red, right? And so what happens is you have all these building blocks to get to this question, which changes the answer, but they can't see that. So when you tell them, hey, I'm trying to explain this concept to you, but before we get there, I need you to understand this thing down here. And they're like, oh, do you think I'm stupid? Oh, you think I'm dumb? Oh, you think I don't know things? Like, oh, you think you're smarter than me? Oh, you think you're better than me? It's like, okay, I just think like I'm trying to explain a concept to you. And they're like, you're saying it like it's not obvious. Like, you're so condescending. Like, you're saying the most obvious shit. And I'm like, okay, I hear that. But even though you're logically regurgitating back to me what I just said, you're not embodying the understanding. I need you to like understand how we got here. And understanding how we got here is really hard because that's the part of deconstruction, understanding, having a deeper relationship with your biological experience. This is basically my levels. Like when I talk about the levels and it makes people upset, they're upset because they feel like I'm calling them stupid. And I'm saying to you, like, I'm not calling you stupid, but you're kind of a joke. Because you have the audacity to show up and lecture me about how much I don't know when you don't even know the difference between a heterosexual man and a bisexual man. You don't even know the difference between a cis person and a trans person. You don't even know the difference between, and this is just the reductive understanding of these things. God forbid we get deeper. And that's what I'm saying. When people say they've deconstructed, it means multiple things because there's 3 forms of deconstruction people typically are talking about, and they mix up what the meaning is. And I know that that's what's happening because the way people use the word patriarchy or systems or all of these other things, the way we even talk about anything we're talking about. So again, I'm not saying that I'm the smartest person in the room or you're the smartest person in the room. I'm saying all of us rely on collective data and all of us rely on the ability to update that data as we get more information. But when you have a person who cannot update their information, you're at a crossroads. You're at a standstill. Now we don't know what to do. So what happens is they get left behind. So what they end up doing is they end up forming coalition with people who also get left behind. And we call those people conservatives. Which is why these liberal transphobes, these women who said, I think conservatives are starting to have a point. Of course you think conservatives are starting to have a point. You both decided to stagnate. You hit your ceiling. And I'm saying, girl, break the ceiling, keep learning. And they're like, nope, I know what a woman is. I don't need to discuss it. Okay, fine. Okay, but just so you know, and this is the part that I think people miss, just like with everything intersectional, everything is impacted by the other. So look at this. So this is a gaming situation. It's Overwatch. I play Overwatch. So I was like, oh, I'm going to watch this over. I had no idea what I was clicking on when I clicked on this video. I was like, oh, Overwatch. Okay, watch. This is the street. You can talk to people in chat. So if you don't know, so you're going to hear voices of people. You don't know how old they are or where they're from or anything about them.
I don't like transgenders.
I'm a full girl.
You're a fucking tranny, bitch. The only thing cool about you is your penis. You got a penis, bro.
Guys, this is not very accepting. We have to accept everyone for who they are.
Nigga, fuck you.
Bigotry impacts everybody. Hateful rhetoric impacts all of us. Prejudice impacts all of us. It's not just about trans women or queer people or gay people. It's about Black people and brown people and immigrants and sick people and disabled people and health. It's about everybody. It's about all of us. And so again, when we do this thing where it's like, oh, this is just impacting this one group, it's impacting everybody because everybody knows everybody, you know? Okay. So again, when we talk about like, what is a woman? Who are you? How do you know your relationship with gender, right? Stay with me here. Let's watch this video. It says, having a uterus is key to the experience of being a woman. That's the tagline. Oh, interesting, right?
I legitimately hate to do this video because I do not want to attract the wrong people. I don't want to get...
Pause. We're already going to attract the wrong people because this is a transphobic talking point. This is a conservative talking point. This is the reductive point Drew was trying to say, that when you reduce women down to their uterus, that is only coming from one space in the world, which is MAGA, which is conservatives, which is transphobes, which is TERFs. So it's too late. And I believe her. I believe in her heart of hearts, this woman does not want to attract those people. But what we're saying is, and this is what you guys have told me too, you guys have to understand, the social media landscape changes how I talk in public. How I talk in private is completely different. Well, not completely different. There's like a 20% variation because I'm in a space where I can. Oh, the other day, this is a good example. We were doing a member stream and I knew I wasn't going to clip it for YouTube. I just knew I wasn't going to clip it for YouTube. So I said something to my audience that I didn't need to filter in case a conservative heard it. And somebody in my chat was really concerned. They're like, oh my gosh, Brittany, like if a conservative hears this, and I was like, well, they're not going to hear it on a member stream. And they were like, oh, I forgot it was a member stream. And I wasn't going to clip it for YouTube. But they're right. That when I talk to members, I change the way I talk. When I know I'm not going to clip it for YouTube and only members will see it, I'm more chill. Because I'm not thinking about all the bad people who could end up seeing my video. Okay, when I talk to my partner, when I talk to my family, the way I talk is different because I don't have to filter, or the filter I have to do is more for the people I'm talking to. So the dilemma when having this conversation in public, on YouTube, on TikTok, is it's really hard to think about who could be listening and how do we have these conversations without conservatives. And I have this problem too. There are so many conversations I want to have with you guys. They get so difficult to have because there's always a conservative, there's always a talking point, there's always what if this is what Republicans say. But again, this is why us as creators have to decide, are you a creator? Like, okay, at some point, the discussion has become, what's up with this discourse on TikTok? Everything's discourse. Okay, we can do something new where we never stitch a TikTok again, but no one's going to watch those videos. I know, I'm a YouTuber. I see my analytics. If I have a video where I talk, but there isn't enough TikTok or isn't enough media in the video, it does worse. Because your brain still needs the stimulation of seeing somebody other than me talk. It just seems to be the new thing that everybody needs. And unless you're used to watching a podcast that's like solo, it's really hard to watch an hour-long video where one person is talking to a camera, unless you're really, really that girl, okay? Unless you're really that kind of a person that cleans the house and listens to it, okay? Which I get. But most people do want to see other people talk. They want to see other opinions, especially since they'll go, oh, Brittany, I've never seen a TikTok like this. Proof? Or I will say, I wonder who these people are shadowboxing. I wish they gave me a TikTok so they could give me an example. So again, I need to use these examples, but here's the problem. This person only has like 500 likes on this video. Most of these TikTokers aren't even TikTokers. They're just like regular people who end up saying the thing that most people are feeling or some people are feeling. So then all of a sudden they become TikTokers. And that's what social media is to some extent. That's what celebrity is to some extent. It's just a person everybody knows and everyone gives their attention to and everyone says their name enough. Like, I'm sure recently, I don't know if you've seen that Andrew Wilson was on Joe Rogan. And I saw that and I was like, why would Andrew fucking loser Wilson be on Joe Rogan? And I don't even like Joe Rogan, but you know what? I'm sitting here like, how did he do this? He did it because he just made his name out there. He just made sure he was always on whatever podcast. He made sure he made friends with certain people. You just know certain debate bros are absolutely dying over the fact that Andrew Wilson got a Joe Rogan before them. And there is something funny about that. There is something very satisfying about the fact that Andrew Wilson got on Joe Rogan before I know most of these debate bros were dying to get on Joe Rogan and have a much better following than Andrew Wilson. But the point is that like when I see that happen and I see Andrew Wilson and Candace Owens doing their big debate, she's going to be paid $300,000. If you guys know, you know, it's such a weird bubble. But you look at this bubble and you're just like, how did this happen? They just got in your faces. They just made sure their name was always in the conversation. They just made sure that anytime anything happened, their name got brought up. And then boom, popularity, boom, access, boom, their name gets mentioned to the right person, right? And that's how it happens. That's why shout outs, that's why like collaborations change the game for creators, because now it's like, why is this person always here? Why do I know this person? Who is this person? And then all of a sudden, this person is a celebrity and all this person is your favorite debate bro. And I'm saying that is how it works, okay? The dilemma is on TikTok. I truly do not know how many of these people are intentionally choosing to do this, like in the debate bro space, where it's very intentional. I don't know how many of these women aren't just genuinely getting on the internet and naively trying to be authentic in their bigotry. So watch this TikTok with all of that said.
Ammo to people who are transphobic and homophobic and just in general hateful people. But I do think that I do a huge disservice by not saying what it is I'm about to say. It is impossible for a trans woman to understand what it's like to be a woman more than a cis woman. Because when we look at the ways in which women are disparaged, oppressed, murdered all over the world, a lot of it goes back to our biology as females, okay? When we look at how they attack women all over the world, they tend to start with our physical bodies and our biology. With that being said, if you are not born with this biology, then it is impossible for you to grasp the concept of what it actually means to be a woman in this world. And I'm not saying that means you're not a woman. I'm not saying it means that you can't feel it or understand it, but it would be like me moving to Japan as an immigrant and saying that I understand what it means to be a Japanese woman more than a born and raised Japanese woman. If you traveled enough, you know that there are aspects of a culture that would take a lifetime for you to understand as a transplant, as an immigrant, whatever you want to call yourself.
Okay, so okay, this is really difficult. So before I actually try to explain it, I want you to watch this TikTok, and then I'm going to try to explain why she's kind of right, but she's kind of wrong. But there's something there but I'll explain it. Give me a second. Look at this TikTok.
Gender is just kind of nothing burger, in my opinion. Like, it's nothing. Being a woman is nothing. Being a man is nothing. Like, as a cisgender person, like, I was just born with a vagina. And then people started calling me stuff. And they called me she. They called me a woman, so I'm like, okay, that's like fine, I guess, but it doesn't really mean anything. It's nothing burger. Being a woman is just an incredibly neutral thing, and there's no real criteria for it other than calling yourself one. So I don't really see something beautiful or ugly. It just like is. What I find ugly is people trying to assign meaning to it, like trying to assign not meaning to it, but assign like that it means something about me, trying to project all these stereotypes onto it, like that being a woman doesn't mean I'm soft or harsh, or it just doesn't mean anything. Being a woman doesn't mean anything. The only reason that like I've come to identify is that more so that I just identify with the experiences other women have had. It's really just like about camaraderie for me at the end of the day. I enjoy talking to people that have experienced something similar to me, but there's no like real personality trait assigned to anything. It doesn't put a label on your inner world, because everyone's inner world is too complex to be a man or be a woman. It's just nothing, because it's everything. This doesn't make, I don't know if any of this makes sense, but I don't know. I just am. We just are. So trans women want to be women, then they are women, because that's really the only criteria.
Okay, back to this woman.
Right? Like, there are aspects of humor and language and connection that me as an American, I can never understand, even with the amount of reading and studying and being immersed in the culture, because I'm American by birth, and this is what I've been indoctrinated and raised as. I can only understand them conceptually. I can't understand them internally. And I want to reiterate that I'm not saying that a trans woman can't internally understand and feel these things, but I do think that it is, I don't know what to call it. I'm going to just say an ignorance to act like, or a delusion to act like biology doesn't play a huge part in what it means to be a woman all over the world, okay? Now, as someone who is educated and studied gender and sex and all that good stuff, conceptually, especially being American, and I think this is where Americans fall short, okay? Because we do live in a different world than some people in other places. I'm going to explain what I mean by that. As an American, I think it's really easy to say that your biology has nothing to do with your understanding of gender, okay? I think it's easy to say that in America, a little bit easier. It shouldn't be that easy. As a Black woman, we all know what it means to be a Black woman in America. And we know that a lot of it has to do with our biology, right? But there are literally multiple places in the world where having a period means that you can't go to school. It means you can't go to work while you're having your period. Why? Because of the shame. And that shame exists because periods are had by women. There are places in the world where women have to get, young girls have to get their clitorises chopped off because they are women, okay?
Okay. She even put, if you're transphobic, I'll delete your comment. This is a very authentic person, I think. I think she's being very authentic. I think what she's trying to say, I could be wrong. And I think I want to give her some, okay? Let me, why is that happening? Oh, I see. Okay, let me just change this really fast. Okay. So, when we talk about micro, macro stuff, this is where people get really lost, okay? So you exist, and you exist on a planet, okay? When you are socializing with groups of people, you are going to be treated differently based off the bubbles, okay? The places you exist in, the perceptions, right? When you come back home, this is how you treat yourself. Okay? But what we do, because we're impacted by the world around us, is we take that input from the bubbles and we internalize it. And then we embody it. And then we regurgitate it. Okay? And I'm saying, in order to unlearn those things, in order to unlearn it, you kind of have to start again. As an adult, you almost have to become like a baby and say, okay, if I was starting from scratch, how would I view myself? Okay. We know race is a construct. We know it doesn't exist outside of our perception. And we know it was heavily created and pressured, promoted by white supremacy, right? We know it was on purpose, that there is no fundamental difference between Black people, white people, Asian people. Like, we're all the same. But the reality of that experience doesn't play out on the micro, because on the macro, we're all the same. But on the micro, like, tell that to Black people that are targeted by cops. Tell that to brown immigrants. You know, it's not going to compute. They're going to be like, what are you fucking talking about? Race is a construct. Like, their identity, right? They are Black people. They are Asian people. They are West Asian. This is who I am. I would be this every lifetime, right? That is us holding on to an identity that says, this is how I know myself. But here's the thing. And this is the hard part about introspection. And I mean this so compassionately. And maybe this is honestly, this is like deep philosophy. It really is. And I know it's going to sound condescending, but hear me out. Even the need to say I'm going to come back as a woman every time, which I say, that is because of patriarchy and white supremacy and all the other things. It's because you're thinking about the systems. You're thinking about being proud of being a marginalized person who's overcome and loved themselves. But the truth is, you could just come back. Not as a Black person or a white person or a girl or a boy or whatever gender. You would just come back as a living biological creature. But we put a reasonable, I think it's really logical to put an emphasis on the importance of coming back as we are, because we're learning to love ourselves in a world that tells us to hate ourselves, to the point where it tells us to kill ourselves, right? So us coming back and saying, I'm going to come back as a woman, as a trans person, as a Black person, is a form of radical self-love. And that's the part of this that I'm deeply empathetic to, is that I can't tell you how many times being perceived as a woman has impacted my life negatively. I also can't tell you how much I love being a girl. I also can't tell you how much I really am a man. And this comes from the different types of relationships that are able to be had as you deconstruct gender and the social expectation of what it means to be. Okay, like listen to me when I say this, that these conversations we have about gatekeeping our communities are because of oppression. They're not because they are true. They're because they're true within the micro. We know words are constructs. Nobody, like in an ideal world, everybody could say every word. In an ideal world, everybody could have every hairstyle. In an ideal world, everyone could wear whatever clothing. But we don't live in that world. We live in a super oppressive world. This is why I said you can't be trusted with slurs. In an ideal world, you could literally say a slur and we'd be like, okay, it's just a word. But it's not just a word, is it? Because we can't let it be just a word. Just like your gender isn't just a gender. The only time your gender gets to be your gender is personally with you. Otherwise, your gender is a perception people have of you, which is why I say it is a life and death situation for us to be ourselves. This is what cis women do understand, but they don't even understand that if you're a trans woman, you are feeling that double. And it's hard for cis women to understand this because to them, trans women are choosing to be women. They're choosing to be oppressed. They could just say a man. And I'm saying they're women though. They can't. If they try to do that, they will kill themselves because they can't live authentically. So what they do is they come out and live authentically, but living authentically in a transphobic world means you're now triply, doubly, quadruply more likely to get killed by that same world. Because the same group of people that were going to kill those women will convince those women to turn their hate on those women, the trans women. They'll say, oh, I was going to kill you, but if you team up with me, we'll kill them. And you're going to say, bet. Sounds good. Let's do that. I'm on board. Because it's about survivability. And I'm saying you have to get out of survival mode to get into living mode. And this is really hard in a world that is surviving. The world is surviving. And so these conversations are the way that we're going to have these conversations for the rest of our lives. Forever. That's why I say liberate yourself and don't wait for the world, because the world's not going to catch up. So liberate yourself and then jump back into the world where it's like crazy, and then jump back into your house and then jump back into, because you can't. Now, let's go to the medical side of this about PCOS, PMOS, because I think this is interesting. So here's the update for people who don't know, just so we're all on the same page.
Finally been renamed, and it's about time. PCOS has finally been renamed, and it's about time. My name's Dr. Joel, the Medical Mythbuster, and let's talk about why polycystic ovary syndrome has now become polyendocrine metabolic ovarian syndrome. So first, the cis in PCOS were actually never really cis. They're immature follicles, and PCOS is so much more than that. It's linked to hormone imbalances, insulin resistance, infertility, diabetes, heart disease, anxiety, depression, sleep apnea, and so much more. Because the name focused on ovaries and cis, millions of people were treated as if this was just a gynecological neurological issue instead of a whole body metabolic and endocrine disorder. That misunderstanding had consequences. Studies show that up to 70% of people with the condition go undiagnosed, even though approximately 1 in 8 people of reproductive age with ovaries is thought to have it. That's why after years of international research and input from over 14,000 clinicians and providers, the condition has been renamed polyendocrine metabolic ovarian syndrome, PMOS. Ovarian stays because ovarian dysfunction is still part of the condition, but cyst is gone because it was never medically accurate. Names matter in medicine. They influence research funding, medical education, diagnosis, stigma, and whether a patient's diagnosis is even believed. A better name could lead to earlier diagnosis and better treatment that leads to care for the whole person, not just one organ. If you've been dealing with irregular periods, acne, hair changes,
Note the whole person, not just the organ. Note the whole person, not just the organ.
unexplained weight loss, infertility, or feeling dismissed by the healthcare system, you deserve answers.
Okay, this is very important. Before I get into it, chat said, this might be dumb, but it is in good faith. If gender is a construct and there is so much negative stigma and difficulties living as a man or a woman, why do we all not just adopt non-binary? Like, should the next movement not be to deconstruct it to the point where identifying as a man and woman is irrelevant or outdated? So you said characteristics are only men and women when we label them as such. Why can't my characteristic and Brittany's, I'm not sure, just be my characteristic and Brittany's? Because I don't exist. The fact that my name is Brittany will bring judgment. The amount of think pieces that have been made about me being a fucking stupid bitch because my name is Brittany, you can't escape it. The next revolution is hierarchy dismantling, not gender dismantling, other than understanding that what you label yourself doesn't inherently mean I get to judge you. So it doesn't matter if you get rid of men and women, which should not be the goal. The goal should be to say, I'm not going to judge you for being a man or a woman. I'm not going to judge you for being non-binary. The issue is hierarchy. You think you're better than me because you're cis. You think you're better than me because your name is John. You think you're better than me because your name is, you think you're better than me because your skin is this. I don't need to get rid of men and women. I need to get rid of hierarchy. Because why do you think you're better than me? Okay, so that's it's a good question, but that's the difference. Is we as humans, we're so dependent on a hierarchy that even someone's name will be like, you're less than me. You're literally less than me. Your name is stupid. And I'm like, your name? But like, that's what it is, okay? Now here's the thing. Note that he said, Dr. Joel, who I do like, okay, it's about the whole person, not the organ. So when I had the conversation the other day and I said, I'm pretty sure cis men can get PMOS or PCOS, people were like, no, Brittany. And I was like, I'm pretty sure I've seen that, or I understand that they can get it. So I'm going to explain my thinking to you because I couldn't at the time, it was not part of the discourse. It was a derail in the original conversation. And I didn't know at the time how to but so I came prepared today to sort of explain why I think that's true. First, just to go back to the beginning, what is a cis man? Just so we're all on the same page. You know what I mean? Like, what is a cis man? When I say a cis man, like, what do you think of? Because what you think of matters. Like, what you think a cis man is matters. This is why the movement of TERFs on TikTok saying we're not cis women, we're just women, because they're recognizing it matters. They're saying, oh, it matters that I'm being called cis, right? So when I say a cis man, how do you know somebody is a cis man? Okay. You said individual assigned and socialized male, AMAB with a penis, assigned male at birth, assigned male who identifies as a man, someone who is evil, sarcasm. They're just men. Let's see, genitals. Okay. So a cis man, typically in the way that we use it, is a person who identifies with the gender they were assigned at birth. Okay. You guys are thinking too deep about it. You're, don't think too deep about it. Just like, what is a man? Like, what is a cis man? That's usually what we understand it is like our babies get born and we decide what the baby's going to be. And then we look at the baby and we go, boy, girl. Okay. So that's what they think it is. if you have a person come into the universe who is misidentified as a boy and never gets hormone checks and never gets anything examined, and we don't know the inner workings of this person's life, then what is the thing that makes them a man? Like, what is the thing that makes them a boy? Okay. Is it that they have a penis? Right? Like, is it that they have a vagina? Okay. How is all of society dictating what our babies are? Because remember, it's not about what your 35-year-old roommate is. It's about what babies are. We have to bring this back to babies because that's when it all starts. So how do we know someone is a cis baby versus a trans baby? How do we know the gender of your baby? Okay, we don't, is the problem. So when I say, like, I'm pretty sure cis men can get PMOS, I'm thinking of a person who's told they're a guy as a baby and they have no indication otherwise. Everything seems normal. And as that person gets older, they're having a completely different relationship with their biological experience and or have organs that don't match or genitalia that doesn't match, or this, like, something went different than expected, but not wrong necessarily. Because when we have conversations about intersex people, okay, right? I want you to recognize intersex people are not people generally who want to be cured. They're having a different experience, but people will see them as damaged. And I'm saying you're not damaged. You're having a different experience, and that experience is just as valid as being a cis or a trans person. Okay? So when we have conversations, we have to be very careful about the idea that, like, assigning a baby a gender then dictates how things are seen later on versus thinking of all of the variations of the biological experience that could lead to, because when we gender illnesses or diseases or sicknesses, we lose a lot of people, you know, and especially men who are socialized under patriarchy, never go to the doctor. That's like a stereotype. So how many men are existing in the world, cis men are existing and are having intersex, you know, realities? A lot of the intersex people I've been listening to, they don't even know they're intersex till they're like 16 to 25. You know, some were 50. And I'm like, and they're like, oh, that explains so much about my life, right? So when we have these conversations, I think there's something to be said about the nuance of all of our experiences. And I want to validate all of the experiences instead of people living with a shame that they were broken or made wrong. And this plays into eugenics and ableism. This plays into disability. You're not less than because you're born disabled. Like, you're not broken. You know, from an ethical, moral perspective, this is not a broken child. Okay? So when we have these conversations, I think we need to be careful because what cis people are doing who are transphobic, they're saying we're normal and you're not normal. And I'm saying in a world where we don't know what's going on in everyone's bodies, I'm telling you right now, if we really knew, okay, if we really knew, we'd have more trans people, gay people, intersex people. Like, there's just no way it's only 1 or 2% of the population. 8 billion people. 8 billion people. Come on now. You guys are saying there's a lag. It's not an audio lag, right? Is it just a stream lag? Because YouTube's been funny lately. I just want to make sure it's not an audio lag before I continue because that's terrible. But if it's just a stream lag, just reset the stream. You know how it is, technology girls. Okay. I want you to see this video. Let me double check that that's the one I want to start on. Okay, I want to start on this video. Okay. Check out this video. Okay, I'm glad it's fine. Okay, check out this video. And again, this is not really in any order, but I want to start here because of something that is said in this video. So just check this out. It says most intersex people don't know they're intersex. And mind you, cis people are not normal and intersex people are not abnormal. This narrative that, like, cis people are like, oh, you were born intersex, you're like not normal. I don't like that. I don't like that. Okay.
The vast majority of people who are intersex have no idea that they're intersex. The most common way that most people have found out that they're intersex is because they're professional athletes and they get their hormones tested, because now we do that for professional athletes, and they find out that like, oh, your T level's too high, or like, oh, your T level's too low, like something weird's going on here. But since they're only testing quote unquote women's sports, you're more likely to find out you're intersex if you are assigned female.
Not even that. If you look up intersex on YouTube or TikTok, it is all almost like femme presenting people. And I'm like, what's happening? What's going on? And a big part of it, I think, plays into patriarchy and the fact that, quote, women go to the doctors more often and we have very invasive doctor's appointments. Guys, when we're little girls, people like examine our bodies like in very interesting detail. And then when we get to older, our gynecologist has to go inside of us. Like, you know what I mean? I don't know what men are doing at the doctor, but like, you know how many times I've had to get ultrasound? They put a big stick inside of my vagina. You know, and I have to get a new one, actually. I have a new one coming up. Like, they got to go into my body when I go to the doctor. And so like when we have these conversations about like what's happening when we go to the doctor, and then not to mention that like if men, socialized men are not going to the doctor, they're finding out different things about themselves way later. Like they don't even know. We don't have the data. I genuinely feel like the world doesn't understand that we don't have the data we think we do, but the little pockets of data we have indicate certain conclusions, right? Okay.
Yeah,
Like,
that makes sense.
So like
Yeah.
assigned male athletes aren't finding out because nobody ever tests their hormones
Yeah.
before they go perform.
Remember the NBA TikTok I showed you earlier? He said it's interesting that you guys have criteria for what qualifies as a woman in the WNBA, but not what qualifies as a man in the NBA. Because again, this goes back to patriarchy and regulating women and regulating queer people. And look, typically, this goes back to what Drew Afualo was saying. Typically, trans women might have a deeper, different understanding or more beautiful understanding, according to ER, of the experience of being a woman. But it's often just minority, marginalized people who are looking for answers because they know their internal relationship isn't matching the external validation or invalidation they're getting from society. So it's like a queer kid who was closeted. I was like looking around. I remember I asked the most rebellious girl in the homeschooling collective, the most rebellious girl. She just came from public school. And I was like, I was middle school. I leaned over and I said, have you ever kissed a girl? And she went like this, oh, Brittany, no, don't ever say that. And I was like, ew, I was just wondering. You know what I mean? Like, I was so just like nobody I could talk to be like, do you kiss girls? Or am I just having this thought of kissing girls? Like, am I the only one who wants to kiss a girl? You know? So like, I think people forget that is happening to kids. Kids are silently looking at you and observing and wondering, where am I going to get this validation from? Where is it safe to ask these questions? And then you live in a world where women create safe spaces to ask each other these questions. I remember when I was like 19, one of the women in my family, like family friend, she had 2 kids, 2. And she asked me, she reaches over during a get together and goes, Brittany, I go, what? She goes, you know about sex, right? I was like, yeah. She goes, how many holes do we have down there? I was like, girl, you had 2 babies. And she was like, I know, I just don't know. And I was like, okay, girl, let's go Google. Let's go like have a conversation about how many holes you got down there. Because like people are having whole ass children and they don't even know their anatomy. And why would they? In a world that is so shameful, in a world that you're not allowed to talk about your clitoris, you're not allowed to talk about your asshole, you're not allowed to talk about your body parts, in a world that doesn't know the difference between vulva and vagina, like, yeah. Okay, or the fact that your labia looks different, genitals look different. The fact that porn is so in our brains, we think all penises look the same and all vaginas look the same. Guys, there are so many variations of genitals. You see one genital, you've only seen one genital. There are so many different shapes and sizes and everything. Like there's no one way to have a penis, no one way to have a vagina. Okay, there's no one way to have genitalia. That's why intersex people are so a part of they need to be more into the part of the conversation. They're a part of a normal part of being a person. Their genitalia is also normal. Like when we have these conversations, there is nothing wrong with your genitals. The fact that labiaplasty became so popular, look, I get it if it's really haunting you. And also, what are we doing? You know what I mean? And I'm all about gender affirming care. So if you want to shorten your labia, that's none of my business. But also, you know,
It's insane.
It's
but
so dumb. It's so dumb.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, actually, it turns out you have like fully formed testes just inside of you that are producing a high level of testosterone. And
See, how are you going to know you have internalized testes? How are you going to know that? You can go your whole life without knowing this. So then, you know what's worse is like the people who like come out here and they create their whole narrative around what they think is normal about their body without even knowing the depth and interesting layers of their own biological experience, their own. And then what does this mean? That's why we get a bubble pop. That's why we shatter. That's why our illusion shatters about the world. That's why deconstruction is so hard away from religion, because you're like, everything that I was and everything that I knew and everything that I identified with is different. It's not there. What is this? You know? So how do you know if we're not all going to the doctor? You know, in the United States, you can't even pay. We don't even have the money to go to the doctor in the United States. So you got to think about it from that perspective too. How many things are just happening in your body you don't know because none of us can afford to go check? Like, you would think we'd be screening for cancer every year for people, but we don't. And then people all of a sudden find out they have a huge mass in their stomach that's been growing for 10 years that they couldn't do anything about. That's what I'm saying. We don't even know our body has anything going on because we don't want, it's not normalized within culture. So if it's not normalized within culture, so when we sit there and say we know everything there is to know about existence, we have all the data we need, we haven't even started to gather that data. Okay. On the conversation of PCOS, PMOS, fun fact, the intersex community is debating and they've been discussing on whether or not it is an intersex condition. Meaning all of these cis women that are saying, I'm a real woman because I get PCOS, I get PMOS. Are you an intersex woman? Because the intersex community, some people think it is an intersex condition, and some people think it's not an intersex condition. And that's the other part of, again, shattering your illusion of your cisness, which is like this idea that you have this thing that you're saying is proof you're a woman. But then what is even a woman? Right? What does that mean? Intersex people can be men or women or identify with different genders. But I'm saying, like, what do you think this means? Okay, so here's some TikToks on it. It says, this comment says, PCOS isn't being intersex, and being intersex doesn't automatically make you trans. Me saying they're not related means one is not dependent on the other. Okay, so that's the comment. And then this individual is responding.
I only disagree with this a little. PCOS could mean being intersex. If you have a chromosomal variation or a genital variation, it's a lot more clear cut. But if you have an endocrine variation like PCOS, depending on your experience with it, because it's a syndrome and it presents differently for everybody, it could mean that you feel that you're having an intersex experience, and that's what it meant for me. But I had a full Ron Swanson rooted system beard, and at 15 I had to go get a job at Blockbuster Video to afford electrolysis so that I could manage it because I was shaving 3 times a day. Now for me, I was already feeling, that I was on a gender journey, and so I'm trans non-binary already, and so PCOS just further kind of solidified intersex for me, but it doesn't mean it for everybody, because women can have beards, so it just depends on where you're coming from. But yes, you could have PCOS,
Exactly.
be intersex, be trans, and get the discount. Hope that helps.
Yeah, exactly. It depends. That's why I love categorization. This is why gender binaries are so annoying, because they don't allow for variations or / most people's lived experience, which is going to vary from the quote default, which is why creating a default is bad. There should be no default about what it means to be a man or a woman. That is what we need to, because that creates the hierarchy of like, oh, but you're not the default setting. What default setting? Why do we even have a default setting? What is this default setting? Why are we assuming there's one? Okay.
A lot of people find it shocking that I didn't know I was intersex until I was 23, but most people don't find out until they're adults. The reason for that is because medicine here in the US is very binary. Medicine in general, like, it's very binary, as in like what they consider a man and the standards for a man are very rigid and very like boxed in. Same thing for like women, it's very boxed in, very rigid. So anyone that falls outside of that binary biologically, like me, is not something that they know how to take care of or even treat. I'm pretty sure I made my first couple doctors very insecure about their knowledge because I did not fit those boxes and they literally didn't know what to do with me. I oftentimes felt like a guinea pig in these settings, and they would just be like, let's try this out. And there wasn't anything necessarily wrong with me. I just wasn't experiencing a puberty like most people do, and it's literally because my genes don't match those specific standards that they have for what it is to be a woman or what it is to be a man.
Okay, wait. Go back to, where is she? Hello? Okay, go back to this lady. And you know how she was talking about like being Japanese and how she'll never know what it's like to be Japanese? Nobody will ever know what it's like to be anything than what they are. You can't, you like, sort of. I know what it's like to be something I'm not, kind of, but not in the same way. But I only will ever know what it's like to be me. And so when you tell trans people they're not having that experience, or you tell them they're not having that exact thing happen, and they're telling you like, no, it's happening, okay? Or you tell anyone that they're not happening, like, there is a difference. And this is where the conversation gets really confusing. Again, when my friend went through psychosis, and I interviewed them, if you want to listen to the podcast we did together, it was a devastating, life-shattering, world-shattering experience for everybody involved. It was such an eye-opener to how much the world doesn't know about anything. You do not know anything about psychosis. Not only do you not know anything about psychosis, neither did we. Okay? And not even that, neither did they. And you know what? Even more than that, the world isn't even ready because they don't think it's real. They think it's fake. They think you're faking. They think you're faking it to do bad things. The dilemma is, I knew my friend something was wrong because when they were talking to me, I was like, this almost sounds like you, but it doesn't sound like you. Is something wrong? And they're like, no, nothing's wrong. And then they would say something like activism-y, like something like, we should go save this part, or like, oh my God, this is the answer for this. And I'm like, yeah, that doesn't sound like you. I mean, it kind of sounds like you, but something's weird. Call their friends, I call our mutuals. I'm like, yo, something's wrong. And they're like, yeah, something wrong. I was like, call them, talk to them, something's wrong. So they would call and be like, hey, dude, what's up? And then they would start talking and be like, I don't know. They seem kind of maybe different. Maybe they're just high. Maybe they're just like, it's locked down. Maybe they've just been secluded for too long. I was like, they're being weird though. Something's wrong. Like, that's not them. The themness that is them, I can't see it. Where are they? Where did they go? It's kind of like Alzheimer's or dementia. That's what I think about it. Like, you know, it's that scene of The Notebook where she's gone and then she comes back. That's exactly what it was like with my friend. It was the most devastating experience. I could cry just thinking about it. But they would come in and out where I'm like, oh my God, there you are. And then they would disappear again. And I'm like, ugh. And like, it was so hard. But I just keep imagining, what if they didn't have us? What if they didn't have their family? What if their friends didn't rally? What if they didn't have a community? What if they didn't have anyone who could help them? Like, would they have become unhoused? Would they have gone in a car accident? Would they have killed somebody? Like, what if something bad had happened? Would they have killed themselves? Like, I keep thinking of all the things that could have gone wrong. And then I think about that when I see every single story in the news, and I just think like, oh, like what could be prevented? Okay. That experience fundamentally changed me. I don't think it fundamentally changed everybody involved, but it definitely changed me. Like, my world changed. How I perceive people changed, right? My compassion also grew because I couldn't imagine what they were going through, genuinely. It was like such a traumatic experience. In that moment, I could say something is wrong. That's not them, because I know them. I know the themness. When a stranger on the internet, or somebody even in your life who doesn't want to see you for who you are, somebody who's bigoted already, they're going to say, you're not trans. I know the real you. But if the real me can't exist in a space with you because in your world I don't exist, then you could never be a good mirror for what is the real me. It takes a very specific person to be able to say to you, you're acting weird, dude. You're acting unlike yourself. And it has to be somebody who isn't projecting their own values onto you. Because if you walk into a space with a transphobe and trans people just aren't allowed to exist in their reality, then that part of you never lights up for them. They never see it. They can't perceive it. And if they can't perceive that part of you, sure, they can see other parts of you, which is valid, but then they can't help you and all the other ways you might need help. The only reason out of all the people in my friend's life that was able to know something was wrong with them is because I think I'm a leftist, and I think because I read psychology books, and I think because I'm educated. Like, I'm self-taught, but I'm educated. Nobody in their life picked up on it the way that I did. And I don't think it's because I'm special. I think it's because I'm well read. I just think it's because I read more. And I was like, nah, something's weird, like something's wrong. And I was wrong about the way that I handled it in many ways. I was wrong about thinking it was like a diagnosis that it wasn't. I also learned for the first time that weed can cause psychosis, not weed alone, but weed plus factors. I never knew that. I learned that. I was convinced. I was like, I bet they have schizophrenia, or maybe it's this, they're at the right age, everything makes sense. But no, it was weed induced psychosis. And it's real. And even when I tell weed people this, they're like, no, Brittany, weed doesn't cause psychosis. Pfft, maybe the weed you're smoking. But you got to be careful. Capitalism got its dirty fucking hands on weed. And this shit is crazy out here. And plus, they were isolated. Plus, they weren't sleeping. Plus, they weren't socializing. I think people forgot that lockdown was so necessary, but it took a huge mental toll on a lot of people. And I cannot believe that we weren't able to have a more intersectional conversation about isolation and how dangerous it is for people. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know why we acted like that was easy. It was very hard. Like isolating was very hard on people. And so I think it's because maybe some people weren't isolating as much, and I get that. But I think in many ways, my friend wouldn't have had psychosis if they weren't isolating. I also think they wouldn't have psychosis if they slept. I also think they wouldn't have had psychosis if they didn't smoke weed. And I also think they wouldn't have psychosis, blah, 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 right? The idea is like when we're deciding if somebody's having an authentic experience, right? It's dependent. It's dependent, right? Chad said, as a trans woman, I don't agree with Drew's statement, and I understand why cis women want to argue against it, especially because I know so many trans women still stuck in patriarchal self-perception. Well, that's why I said at the beginning of this that it's not that you're a trans woman, it's that you're a queer trans woman. I think queer people have a better understanding of gender than cis people who haven't deconstructed patriarchy. But I'm not necessarily thinking that of trans women, period. But queer trans women, queer, really queer, like we can talk about it, right? Okay, here we go. Let's go to this one now. Okay, so this, not only did my Discord recommended it, I already had it ready to go. Minnesota State Senator, mom, reproductive justice advocate. This is so important. When we zoom out and look at the politics of it all, look at this.
She asked me about trans inclusion in sports. I was just talking to a woman and she asked me about trans inclusion in sports, why everybody's freaking out about it. And I explained why. And she was like, you have to tell everybody. Genuinely thought I had, but I will explain it again just in case. The far right wants to dismantle anti-discrimination laws in this country, and they are using trans people to do it. The first step in this was to get the broad public to start repeating messages that women are inferior to men. They have done this through a very clever slogan that women are weaker than men. It's very clever because weak can mean many things, but anti-discrimination laws actually protect us from being victims of sex stereotyping as well. And so getting everybody to repeat a sex stereotype as fact, that women are inferior to men inherently and naturally. That's the message we take in. Getting women to repeat that, women who are in sports to repeat that, it is the best thing that the far right have ever accomplished, right? So first you get the false message that women are inferior to men to permeate into the culture. Once you have that, you get this. The Heritage Foundation, who are the architects of Project 2025, they are behind the multi-billion-dollar campaign to create hysteria around trans people existing. They put out a paper last month that said Title IX is a failed experiment. Now, Title IX is not a sports law. Title IX is an anti-discrimination law that protects people from being discriminated against on the basis of sex in education, all of education. One of the beautiful outcomes of Title IX is, of course, girls and women's sports. But this is about anti-discrimination laws in education. And the Heritage Foundation, playing off of women are inferior to men, now they say, well, because women are inferior to men, any laws that treat men and women equally are bad. It's a failed experiment. We are engineering equality where there is none. That is their argument in this paper, that women are inferior to men, and therefore any laws that force women and men to be treated equally under the law are bad, and we shouldn't have them. That is what they're doing. That is the whole point. With anti-discrimination laws, either nobody gets discriminated against or everybody can be discriminated against. There is no exceptions to anti-discrimination laws. And that is what Title IX is. And they are trying to use trans people to get the public to buy into supporting exceptions to anti-discrimination laws, because once you have exceptions, you don't have an anti-discrimination law anymore. I'm not trying to convince people. This is what they are saying. This is on their website. This isn't like some sort of like secret document. Okay, they publish this themselves on their own website.
So just to be clear, in chat yesterday, I was asked, Brittany, what do you think about trans people in the Olympics? And I said, for the person asking that question about trans people in sports, figure it out. Trans people should be included, period, the end. I don't want to hear arguments. And then this person, came to my comment section, and I'm not engaging my comment section unless you're members, but I will talk about it on stream if that helps. But I'm staying away from my comment section because it's crazy out there. And it's too much mental health to mod everything. It just is. And they said that, and if you're here today, here's your answer. You said, I feel like I was misunderstood. I feel like I was talking about specifically the Olympics, not sports. Girly, same thing. Sports, Olympics, It doesn't matter. We're focused on liberating people out of oppression. Any conversation that talks about men and women being weaker, smarter, different, better, harder is bioessentialism. And I'm saying, fuck all of it. None of it matters. That research is bad and bias and prejudice. I don't want it. Okay. Any conversation, okay, that turns into is a no. Okay. And especially in a world where people are like, oh yeah, I think what those NBA players are doing is stupid. But like, what do you think about trans people being in sports? No.
Last month.
I mean, yes, let trans people in sports, but do not ask me this question like it's a profound question, because it's just another form of transphobia. Okay? Trans people in sports? Yes, because they're just people. They're not, you know what I mean? They're just like everybody else.
Title 9, the law that protects people from discrimination on the basis of sex in all of education, is a failed experiment. And once you get people on board for saying, well, we shouldn't have equal treatment under the law in education, you get this. No equal treatment under the law in employment. In July, 100% of the labor force decline was women. And this is not a mistake. It is not a mistake that 2 years after Project 2025 is being implemented, you have 100% of the labor force decline in 1 month be women. Okay, this is on purpose. Yep. And it is all getting up to, if women are so inferior to men and we shouldn't have equal rights, then maybe we shouldn't have the right to vote. This is the highest echelons of our government that want to repeal the 19th Amendment. These are all, it's the same thing.
Yep.
And so I know that people, when they talk about trans inclusion in sports, which by the way has been the norm in Minnesota for more than 30 years, I was 7 years old when
This is why TERFs saying we care about protecting women in sports don't understand. They're playing right into conservative rhetoric. I mean, maybe they understand it. They're playing right into conservative policy that is going to take away our right to vote. We're going to lose the right to vote because you guys don't know the fucking difference. We want to liberate everybody. Stop making gender a test you have to pass. Okay? Everyone should be liberated no matter their gender. Patriarchy already oppresses us for our gender. So we need to liberate everyone past the gender. Okay?
Inclusion in every facet of public life became the law in Minnesota. And it has been that way for 30 years. We have the highest participation rate in girls' sports in the entire country. And we've had that for like almost 20 years. Okay? It's been the norm. The reason why all of a sudden you're hearing a lot about it is because they are trying to get people to buy into dismantling anti-discrimination protections so that we no longer are protected and treated equally under the law. That I need folks to understand that we either have anti-discrimination laws, we either have protections from being discriminated against, everyone does, or nobody does.
Right.
The only thing you need to know, we've had it for 30 years in Minnesota. We have the highest participation rates in girls' sports. The world has not fallen. And that every time a far right talks about trans inclusion in sports, they are doing it to build public support for getting rid of our anti-discrimination laws. That is the purpose. That is the primary goal at this point. Mm-hmm. And if you are feeding into that, you're helping them.
Exactly. Now, I don't know much about Erin's platform, but I hope she's a good one, okay? Now, this is very important because look at this conversation that happened on Jubilee. It's just a short clip because I don't want to get copyrighted. It was said, how can someone be born intersex but not be born transgender?
If you were born with a vagina, you are a woman. If you were born with a penis, you are a man.
Okay, that's the most reductive understanding of gender. Your genitals tell your gender, okay? But I'm saying that's not true. Nothing about your body explains to me whether you're a man or a woman. That's my belief. Brittany Simon does not believe men and women exist in the way that we think about them. If human beings were born into the world and we didn't use the words man or woman and we use the words 1 and 2 or blue and red, this is basically the same to me. There is no such thing as a woman or a man any more than there is such a thing as red or blue or 1 and 2 when labeling the differences in what our eyes observe, right? And I'm saying just our eyes. Okay, that's all we're relying on is like, oh, my eyes see a penis, you must be a man. And I'm saying your eyes are not the only thing you need to think about when considering your observation, okay?
Okay, so if you were in war and a grenade went off and you lost your penis, what would your gender be?
Still a man.
Okay, but you don't have a penis. You have no genitalia.
Yeah, well, that's what God gave me. Whatever God gave you with it, you can cut it off.
Pause. Okay, conversation over. If you have to invoke an invisible God that you cannot touch, feel, taste, or fuck, it's over. We're not having this conversation. God is for you. It is not for this conversation. There is no evidence that there is a God other than your relationship with a God. And it's an external claim. You are claiming that external to your brain, there is a God that exists. Fine. If you want to believe that, valid. What does that have to do with this conversation? Conversation over. Conversation over. Okay. This is an intersex advocate, Jackie, And there's conversations about endometriosis, and you guys had mentioned it on the stream, but just for those who missed it, hold on, I clicked the wrong button. Here we go.
If I told you a cisgender man was diagnosed with endometriosis, would you believe me? It sounds impossible, but medicine has actually documented cases of this worldwide. One of the best documented involved a 54-year-old cisgender man who went to the hospital after noticing blood in his urine. Doctors found a mass near his bladder, and when they biopsied it, they discovered benign endometrial tissue, the same type of tissue that normally lines a uterus. How is that even possible? It all starts with embryology. Every human embryo begins with the same basic biological blueprint. Early in development, we all have structures that can become male or female reproductive anatomy, depending on genetic and hormonal signals. In most male embryos, a hormone called anti-Mullerian hormone causes the Mullerian ducts, which would normally develop into the uterus and fallopian tubes, to regress. But biology isn't always perfect. In some people, tiny remnants of those cells still may remain. Scientists have also proposed other explanations, including cells transforming into endometrial-like tissue later in life, or stem cells developing into endometrial tissue under certain conditions.
I'm saying if our gender is so dependent on everything happening on on a scale not observable by the eye, then why are we so beholden to these gender expectations? And it's because everything's about hierarchy and politics, right? It's one thing for our ancestors who had little to no knowledge to come to these conclusions. It's one thing for us who have access to all of this information and shared collective knowledge to not be willing to expand on our understanding as time has gone on. The fact that people are it's been like this for 2,000 years. It's been a lot of ways for 2,000 years, So we got to talk about this. So if all of these things are happening under the surface, if there's all these things that are happening in utero, if there are so many factors, even ADHD and autism, they were talking about how ADHD could have a correlation to your father smoking. Okay, well, all my dad's kids got ADHD because he was a smoker. Okay, he stopped when I came about, but you know what I'm saying? When we have these conversations about our environment impacting people, most people were smoking in the 20s and 50s. All of our boomer grandparents definitely gave us ADHD, or maybe we're just absolutely at the mercy of our environments in the same way that we are anything else, a tree is at the mercy of their environment, right? That's how I see human beings. The growth of us, how we adapt, how much sunlight we have and food and nutrients, it's completely dependent on our environment, except human beings have a plus our ability to observe. Our brains, everything is happening in the brain, right? That's the other part of this. Everything is happening in the brain, right? So if I take your brain and put it in a cyborg, is a cyborg a girl or a boy? You say your genitals tell me your gender, but if you're your brain, if everything is happening here, then what the fuck is this? You know what I'm saying? Who cares about this? How much could this matter if it's this? If you know what I'm saying? There's a thing that's missing here. And I'm not saying somebody isn't a boy or a girl. I'm not even saying it's wrong to gender your kids. Hell, I'm not even saying it's wrong to raise your kids gendered. I'm not even saying any of that. I'm saying it's a mistake for a world that actually wants to do something, to change and problem solve, to assume we know everything. That's what I'm saying. Here's the TV clip from the show House.
Girl, look at me. How can you say I'm not a girl? You may remember that clip from the television series House, when in 2006, Dr. House shocks this young girl by telling her she's not a girl, she's in fact a boy. The episode back then was supposed to be shocking and surprise you and have everyone's jaw on the floor. But the reality was it was an episode about complete androgen insensitivity syndrome, which is what I have. It's an intersex condition where a female with XY chromosomes doesn't respond to testosterone. So because we're completely immune to androgen, we develop externally female. We can't respond to testosterone, so our body makes it into estrogen, and we are hyper feminine. But the show got it so wrong, and it was so cringe.
The show got so many things so wrong. That's the other part of it. I love the people who debunk these science shows because I think the science shows are also educating the general populace. And so the general population is literally regurgitating shit that they saw on TV. And that's the problem is TV is exaggerated. That's why I hate seeing marginalized people exaggerated on TV or underground communities. Cause I'm just it's not like that, bro, but okay, whatever. It's for TV. And that's why I'm so concerned with the way that the way we're processing the medium we're interacting with, whether it's a book or a TV show or anything else. You got to be really careful about these things. Okay, let's look at an elder intersex individual.
In my 20s, been involved in an accident. They found that there were parts that didn't belong. After further investigation,
Note, after an accident. They had to get into an accident to find this out.
Back here in Australia, they found that I was intersexed. I realised I was different as a child. Kids picked up on the fact that a warmness is disclosed. All my life I've cross-dressed, but I've always been, in my opinion, a woman. Never had a lot of friends. They're severely troubled by coping with my changes. So I have no one now, but I have Andrew. Me and Andrew have been together just short of 28 years. And he's cute, cuddly. We have a household where jobs are shared. I open the jars, strong hands. He's the man of the house. I make him buy the coffee for me, but he uses my bank card. We joke about it. I torment him.
I kiss all her cuddly toys to sleep every night, and I kiss both of her hands and both of her feet and her face.
Yeah.
Every night.
Rituals.
Sometimes I do go tiptoe into the room just to see the blankets go up and down so that I know she's breathing. I can't imagine being without Jessica.
Oh, that's mutual.
I just think sometimes we forget that the world is having such a diverse and interesting and complex relationship with itself. And we're just so eager to run to a comment section or a TikTok and reduce it down to, you know, this. Now, I will say I can understand why Drew's podcast hurt people's feelings. I really wish she would just say that. I really wish she would just come out and say, hey, that really hurt my feelings. So Drew can say, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to hurt your feelings. But instead you said, hey, trans people aren't people, and actually they don't have a good relationship with being a woman. It's like, okay, like I really wish you had just come out and said, this hurt my fucking feelings.
There's all kinds of gender identities, but there's only 2 sexes, male and female, plus over 30 different intersex variations. And that's normal? Yeah, and statistically almost as common as redheads, and we wouldn't say they don't exist.
Sex has never been a simple binary.
Intersex is an umbrella term for people born with physical traits that don't fit the typical binary notions of male or female. This may present later in life.
Sex traits include chromosomes, hormones, internal and external genitalia, and secondary sex characteristics, including breasts and body hair, all of which exist on a spectrum.
Intersex infants often undergo invasive, unnecessary, and harmful surgeries in order to force our bodies to conform to the sex binary. This often happens without our or our parents' knowledge or informed consent.
And intersex adults often face a total and utter lack of competent healthcare, often having to travel far distances to access a doctor who can meet our needs.
Intersex bodies are not problems to be solved. We are a natural part of human diversity.
Support intersex organizations advocating for intersex liberation and autonomy, including
Interact, Interconnect, the Intersex Justice Project,
and intersex activists like us.
Thank you to the stars of every.
Okay, I'll go a step further. Chet said I'm behind on stream, but the 2 TikToks, one person saying gender means nothing, the other is talking about the body parts. I feel like there's a misunderstanding of gender versus sex. I am going to make a declaration that I, Brittany Simon, don't believe in sex and gender. I think sex doesn't exist the way we think about it. I think when people say like sex and gender are different, like male and female, and then you can identify as a man or a woman, I don't believe that. I think we should just change the names because it's confusing everybody from male and female to 1 and 2. Blue and black. Blue and red. No, that's too gendered. You know what I mean? Like it's confusing you. Like you're getting confused. Everyone is getting confused, not you, chatter. Everyone is just saying like, oh, like male and female. What does this have to do with anything? Like, why are you so obsessed? Because then everyone goes, oh, so you're a woman, but you were born a man. Or you're a woman, but you're male. Who cares about being male? What is so significant other than what your doctor or how your doctor takes care of you about you being a male? Oh, because you've assigned characteristics to it. And now you've assigned an expectation to it. And now you've decided it's the only 2 defaults. Even though we're learning time and time again that it's not. If intersex people only realize they're intersex by getting into car accidents, then maybe we should all get into car accidents just to double check we're intersex. Do you know what I'm saying? We keep saying, oh, intersex and trans people are such a small part of the population. People can't get examined. People can't come out. Do you know what I'm saying? How do you know how many gay people are there? How do you know how many intersex people are there if intersex people have to get into car accidents before you examine them? How do we know? How do we know how many trans people exist if I can't come out because I'm too afraid of the world? How do we know? You don't know. So here's the thing. I think in order for liberals to fight the patriarchy and white supremacy and all these things, they decided to do the whole like gender versus sex thing, which makes sense. That's a good way to cope. I think the next step of liberation is to say like, none of that even matters. Tell me who you are and like what the conversation's about. And also like, none of this matters. Tell me who you are as a person. The reason we say men as a system, like, oh, men as a system are gross, is because we're talking about men who adhere to patriarchal standards. We're not saying men as individual men, because otherwise that'd be bioessentialist. Okay? Like, what is so significant about this thing? It's your attachment to what this thing means for your whole life. As a man, as a woman, yes, these conversationally can work, but as long as the conversation is, as a person who was raised as a woman, here's my experience, or here's my experience as a woman, because you can identify as a woman, that's fine. You know what I mean? But I don't want you to think that everything about the world needs to be then brought together through this, like, what's your chromosomes? What's your, you know what I mean? Like, these things they're not helping. Okay, now, just for context, as I was researching this, okay, the pro-lifers, the conservatives came up. This is a Students for Life, this is a pro-life unit. Look at this.
So I'm assigned male at birth. I have XX chromosomes that I switched with my mother during.
Yeah, you don't have any Ys, so you can't. Yeah.
No, I am intersex. I have XX chromosomes despite having a male reproductive system, because chromosomes does not equal whatever. I'm not going to get into this talk right now because I'm not going to win.
So this was a brag. They were like, yeah, you're not going to win. I'm not going to win. His words. I don't know their identified pronouns, but they were like, your chromosomes. Like, look, I don't know this person's medical chart. I've never seen it. So that's the problem with this conversation. You're assuming. We're assuming. A lot of us are assuming. And I'm saying we don't even know if we're not examining. So now if your talking points, if your talking points relate to conservative talking points, that's when you have to be cautious. That's when you have to, you know what I mean? Okay. Next conversation. It's her. Is it she, her? I don't know. Because okay, so she, her is the assumption. Here's the other part of this. Regardless of how they identify, I can't know their medical chart. So I believe them, right? Like if they say something happened, I'm going to be like, oh, she must have like a reason for this. Like she must have talked to her doctor but they're just disbelieving her. There's like a disbelief where they're just like, no, this didn't happen. I don't know that it didn't happen, because when I think about research and I think about science, I think about like how much we don't know, not how much we do know. I think a lot of people go off what we do know and they go, that's it. That's all we know. And I'm like, but we have so much more to learn. So look at this. This is another TikTok on intersex and PCOS. Can you talk about people with PCOS, PMOS, and why there's a divide on whether to identify as intersex? Here we go.
So this question asks, can you talk about people with PCOS and why there's a divide on whether to identify as intersex? For those who don't know, PCOS stands for polycystic ovarian syndrome. PCOS is a hormonal disorder that affects people who are assigned female at birth and typically includes things like hyperandrogenism, which is the higher production of testosterone, which then causes things like a lack of periods, body and facial hair growth, oilier skin and acne, and other such characteristics. On the question of whether or not PCOS falls under the intersex umbrella, the answer is yes, PCOS absolutely does fall under the intersex umbrella. For someone to fall under the intersex umbrella, they simply have to have characteristics that don't neatly fit into either binary sex category, and that includes things like chromosomes, internal anatomy, external genitalia, and it also includes hormones. So when we see people with PCOS who are assigned female at birth that have testosterone that is essentially on par with a lot of cis men.
I'm going to pause for just a second to say, welcome to memberships, and thank you to JB for the super chat. Brilliant channel. I love your critical analysis. Thank you so much for the super chat. I super appreciate it.
Yeah, that definitely falls under the umbrella. Unfortunately, there is a lot of pushback for people with PCOS to identify as intersex. And honestly, in recent years, I'm not even seeing this pushback come from other intersex people. I'm seeing this pushback come more from people with PCOS who don't want to be intersex or don't want to fit under the intersex umbrella. And in my experience,
there's a shame element to this that I'm trying to point out to you guys. People feel ashamed. I'm ashamed to be a man. I'm ashamed to be a woman. I'm ashamed to be intersex. I'm ashamed to be this. They're ashamed that we hold on to our identities because they matter to us, and they do think they matter, guys. Your identity matters. And yet I would say to you, liberate yourself from even that construct of it mattering, not because it shouldn't matter or doesn't matter, but because you deserve to live in a world where you are enough. the you that is you. You know what I'm talking about, don't you? The you that is you when you sit alone and you have only you and the voice in your head, you and the thoughts in your head, you that is you when no one's around, you that is feeling free and without reserve in your private space. And if you're not there yet, I hope you get there, because I know that that's also a process. Learning to be alone with yourself and notice yourself and hear yourself and witness yourself. And that person exists outside of all of these social labels that we put on ourselves in order to communicate. I do that to communicate with you. I call myself a leftist so you know where I stand. But Brittany Simon, when she's at home, is not a leftist, because I'm just me. I'm not a political entity when I'm at home. I'm not a structure when I'm at home, right? So when we have these conversations, you know what I mean? I just want you to know that you can be all these things at the same time. I am, you know, there's just different versions of you that get to exist. And that's what I want there to be. So I think I am seeing this as well. A lot of cis women who heavily identify with having PMOS as a part of being a woman, like a reality of being a woman. And I'm saying, what if it's not just about being a woman? Because what if having ovaries isn't something only women have? And they'll say, but like, these people don't have it. Okay. Like, why is it so important for you to have evidence that you're a woman? I mean, you know you're a woman, don't you? Why are you looking for evidence? Because I think there's some part of our brains that's convinced, like, what am I if I'm not a woman? So much more. You're so much more than being a woman. And yet there's something so beautiful about being a woman, because we live under patriarchy that tells us being a woman is gross, it's weak, it's inferior, it's disgusting. But that's just their issue. That's the misogynist issue. That's their version of thinking that. But the truth is like, there's nothing more sacred about being a woman, but I understand, because I do love being a woman. You know, like, I do love being a woman for whatever that means. In the social context, I mean it. I love being with you guys. I like hanging out with girlies. I like hanging out with the girls. But sometimes when I'm not in my woman headspace, I do want to hang out with different people. But I love being in a girl headspace. Okay? And so you have to remember that as well. Like, you are multifaceted.
Experience that tends to come from either a place of miseducation about the intersex experience or internalized shame and stigma surrounding it. Occasionally, I do see people with PCOS who don't necessarily think that they can claim the intersex experience because they don't think that they've been through the, quote unquote, right experiences in order to call themselves intersex, such as, you know, genital surgery or being mistreated by healthcare professionals and things like that. But like, most people with PCOS do have the experience of being mistreated by healthcare officials and being talked down to and being discriminated against because they have PCOS. So I also think that, you know, that's just another layer of gatekeeping. There's also an added layer because doctors and other healthcare professionals really do not want people to identify as intersex. They don't want people to be able to have access to community, to care, to advocacy. And
that's what identity gets you. That's why people are talking about going back to church. It's an identity that gets you consistency, structure, and community. The three things science has proved we need. And I find that in my communities, that's why I look for leftists, queer people, gender deconstructionists, it's philosophy people. It's a label that gives us community. All of those labels give me community. Anime, I love anime. Now I have a community. Oh, I love this hobby. Now I have a community. It's maybe superficial or maybe not as deep or maybe it's super deep, but it is a community. And so that's why people focus on the label so they know where they belong and where they're welcomed and where they can say, I'm one of you. And we're social creatures. So why wouldn't I want you to feel that way? That's why I say my ideal world, like, is a world where we're able to all build and gravitate towards our communities, not from a place of bigotry or oppression or survivability or surviving, but from a place of joy. That when my friends say, hey, I'm going to go hang out with this group here where I have a community, I don't feel like I'm missing out. I feel like I'm celebrating their relationship with that group, and I'm going to go to my group, but then we have a shared group. And it's like one of those things where sometimes people tell me like, oh, do you hang out with your partner and their friends? That's not my group. That's not my social group. You know, they're nice. I've hung out with them before. Obviously, they came to our wedding and they're all nice people, but like, no, like that's not my group. You know what I mean? I think sometimes people forget that we're individuals who are married. And so individually speaking, I have my own friends. It's not that we don't have mutuals. It's that we have our different friend groups. And then I have multiple friend groups. My partner has multiple friend groups. And each friend group represents different parts of ourselves. Okay? And those different friend groups, some of them are hobby friend groups. Some of them are childhood friend groups. Some of those are cousins and family and friends, and it's just dependent, right? So again, when we have these conversations, we are multifaceted always. I think sometimes when you grow up in a certain bubble, conservative, you have church and family, and those often overlap. Like you'll see family at church, church family, family friends, family, and everybody connects. And so they don't feel like they're different bubbles. But for some people, they have church friends and they have family friends. They have school friends and church friends. Everybody is different. And I'm saying you're allowed to be multifaceted and have different friend groups in different places. Okay. Now, this individual I've showed you before, but I think this is really interesting. Is this the one I want to show you? I think this video, it says as somebody who has PCOS, PMOS, I just recently found out it's considered hormonal intersex condition. Just blew my mind. The video is not what I want to show you. The comment section. Let's see if I can find it. Let's see this. Okay, this isn't the comment that I want to show you. I don't know if I'm going to be able to find it, but it said, I struggle so much as a woman with how I feel about myself because of the hair I grow. My mind is totally blown right now and I have a lot to process. Can I just talk to you about something though? Do you guys remember going through that process of deciding if you were woman enough because you had hairy toes or hairy hands or hairy legs? The hair on our bodies, the fact that we're told through propaganda to shave because that's what women do. That's why we say you do have to go through the journey of deconstructing shaving, because your gender identity is tied to it. So here's the thing though, when you're born as a girl or you're assigned as a girl, a big part of girlhood is shaving, but not in the same way that boys experience it. And the way that girls are told they're less if they have hair, and boys are told they're less if they don't. Oh, you have a pube mustache, you don't have any mustache. Okay, girls are told they're less if they have hair. So then little girls have to shave, okay? And this is really difficult because in some parts, you don't want to have to force little girls to shave because they should be more than that. And then the idea, though, is that those little girls should also have the right to consent to shaving if they want to. But you go through this journey that I think is important where you shave as a teen. Let's say you're a teenager, like middle school, like 12 or 13. Then you grow up and you're in your 20s and you're deconstructing the patriarchy, okay? You're like deconstructing patriarchy. And then eventually you go no shaving because shaving is patriarchal, okay? And then you almost like swing back around, but it's not going back. It's actually going forward where you go, okay, now that I've done that, I do kind of want to shave sometimes because I do like the aesthetic, because ultimately grooming is a part of aesthetic. In the same way that you can style a mustache to tell people what group you're in, you can style your arm hair, your leg hair similarly. So I don't think it's always patriarchal to shave your legs, but I do think until you deconstruct the patriarchal need to shave your legs, meaning you can go out in short dresses with long hair, you can wear shorts and not feel judged, you can actually show up in public without shaving your legs and feel good about yourself. Until you can do that, anytime you shave your legs will be because of the conditioning of the patriarchy. So I do that all the time, and I need you to know that people in my life, like women in my life, are like, oh my God, you're so brave for leaving the house without shaving your legs. And I'm like, I get it. I get it, because I had to also go through that journey of, yeah, like it felt like I was being brave, which feels so stupid. Why the fuck do I have a complex as a younger person that I can't leave the house with shaved? I remember when I was younger too, I would rather suffer from razor burn on my legs, and literally like my skin's very sensitive. Like I went to the dermatologist. I don't know what the condition's called, but I have a condition or something where like I have very, very sensitive skin and it just looks bumpy and red and blah, 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 blah. I would rather suffer that than hair on my legs. So I would shave to the point where it would hurt to swim in the ocean and I would get a rash everywhere. And I thought the rash looked better than hairy legs. Anyways, I've deconstructed all of that. I go out all the time in shorts with no shaved legs. I shave maybe once a month if I feel like it. Note, if I feel like it. Otherwise, right? But I refuse to say I'm never going to shave again because like I want a choice, because sometimes I do want to shave my legs. Sometimes I think the aesthetic looks better. But then most of the time I just do whatever I want. And that's what this is about, girls. Doing whatever you want. And also, choice feminism is not the goal. It's not just feminist because you made the choice. It's different schools of feminism, and I'm an intersectional feminist, and I'm a progressive feminist and a leftist feminist. So it must also be deconstructed from patriarchy. Okay? Watch this TikTok. It says, is PCOS considered intersex?
So is PCOS considered intersex? It kind of depends who you talk to. Some doctors and medical professionals and people within the intersex community consider polycystic ovarian syndrome to be what's called a hormonal intersex.
This individual, I don't want you to watch the TikTok. We've watched one, but I want you to see this person. This person, what were they assigned at birth? What's their gender? What's their sex? Do you know anything about them? By just looking at them, like they are, they, them, that's their pronouns. What can we assume about this person? Like if you just saw this person on the street, what would you assume about this person? Genuinely, probably a lot of different things. You'd probably assume maybe AMAB, maybe trans man, maybe they, them, maybe a lot of things, right? Okay.
Condition. So yes, we would qualify as intersex. But there are some people in the community that do not agree that PCOS should be considered intersex. For me, personally, and only for me, I consider polycystic ovarian syndrome, and my case in particular, because of how severe my case of PCOS is, to be a hormonal intersex condition.
Now, obviously, because they're talking about PCOS, people assume AFAB right away because people think only women get PCOS, PMOS, which is why the conversation about intersex matters, because this person is also trans, they, them. But when you think about it from that perspective, there's a lot of assumption we're going in with because we have information that we're getting that we don't even process. Again, could you actually know what you would think of this person in public without them knowing they were talking about PCOS? Because did you think they were AFAB because they were talking about PCOS? This is why I say being a woman doesn't look the same way. Being a man doesn't always look the same way. Being trans doesn't look the same way. You can't tell what someone is by the way they look. But when I say this, we also know that we do use our fashion to signal what we want people to perceive about us. Okay? And that's the other part of it. Oh my gosh, speaking about trans people who are hilarious. Hold on. Oh, is this TikTok going to come up? What's Khadijah's TikTok? What's Khadijah's TikTok? What is it called? Khadijah. This, I found it. Let me see if I can find the. Okay. Look at this TikTok.
Okay. I'm just now realizing that I look alternative to people. Like, what? I don't know what I thought I looked like to people. But Khadijah, lock in.
I see this TikTok and I think to myself, was this not what you were going for? Like, was this not what the vibe was? Like, but then at the same time, that's what's so funny about fashion and expression and like looking in the mirror and you're like, wait, do I look like this? And that's why I say like introspection, extrospection is so funny. I have had this so many times in my life where I'm like, what am I being perceived as? Wait, that's how people are perceiving me? Because I think, and again, this is why all of this to say, you don't even always know what you are being perceived as. So again, there's so much love and humor and compassion that could play into this conversation. And ultimately, this goes back to James Baldwin's quote about like, love was always like the most radical thing. Very few people, like the world is held on by a thread by very few passionate, loving people, right? I'm butchering the quote, but this is what I believe about the world, that the world has been so beaten down by oppressive systems that we don't even know how to love ourselves. So of course we don't know how to love others. Of course we don't know how to love others, right? And not only that, but on top of that, we're so in order to keep ourselves safe, because we're in survival mode, we rely so heavily on the ego. And if I've learned anything from philosophy, there is just, there's healthy ego, which is so necessary, but the road to wisdom requires an intense amount of humility. And that doesn't mean you let people walk all over you. That doesn't mean you don't have boundaries. That doesn't mean any of that. I was just talking to a family member and they tried to, be like, oh, you think like you're a level 5? Oh, you think you're so wise? And then they started like basically defending predators. And I was like, okay, we're done with this conversation. And they go, oh, so much for being a level 5, like so much for being enlightened. I was like, okay, so you're doing this thing where like, if you were a wise person, if you were truly introspective, you could engage in an abusive conversation. And I'm saying it takes a lot of humility to recognize that like people don't want to talk to you. It takes a lot of humility to recognize like people are not going to hear you. And the dilemma again with how we socialize is people will try to hurt your feelings when they feel attacked, when they feel like you think they're less, when, they feel like they're being attacked. And so again, I'm very empathetic to all of the people that felt attacked by Drew Afualo's podcast. And I will just say to you, when you feel activated or a strong emotion, the time or the thing to do in that moment is to meditate. That is what you should do in that moment. And you're not going to do it perfect every time. I'm not going to either, but that's actually the answer. Think about it, calm down, and think to yourself, why am I activated? Because again, you don't always have to know. And I'll finish it with this because this might be the last time we talk about this. If you don't want to date a bi man and you don't know why, you don't have to. But I would encourage you to figure out why. If you don't want to date somebody for whatever reason and you're not even sure why, your no is the only thing that matters. After you say no and you go back home, I would encourage you to meditate on it. No matter even if it's obvious to you, double check. Okay? It's not that you owe anybody consent or you need to distrust your gut or you need to silence the voice in your head that's sending you a warning. Is that you need to go home and check the wiring in your warning and make sure your alarm system is working correctly. Because if you've ever had an alarm system in the house, you know that shit goes off when no one's there. You just know it does that because we have faulty technology. Okay? And that includes our observations of people and our understanding of self. So you do not need to violate your own consent in order to be woke, but you should go home and double check that you still are.